Could we see Arsenal's players take action and strike after the increase in fixture schedules? We discussed that, quotes from some of those involved, injury cover-up questions, and open training hints to who might be available for Arsenal's game against Atalanta on Thursday. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is incredibly appreciated and I hope you're having a fantastic start to your week. And it's indeed now Wednesday, which means that, of course, tomorrow is match day. It means later on today we'll be having a preview show as well and looking into, of course, that Atalanta fixture. And we've got some things to talk about regarding that, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Good morning to those joining us live in the chat. Damien, Blackshine, Steve, Franklin, Maximius, Aidan, Errol, Christopher, Adagoke, Olawale, Pikahu, Paul, Jakob, Arasilki, Rich, Glenn, Temi, and Runs of Cows. Jakob's now been a member with us for 13 months. Thank you so much. Amira, Stephen, Harrison, Blackshine, Stevie, and plenty more of you guys and girls too. Thank you as always for tuning in. You are all very much welcomed and appreciated. And if you could be ever so kind to drop a like on today's video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. But without further ado, let's jump into today's stories. And we begin with last night's Carabao Cup action. Plenty of interesting games. Of course, Arsenal not involved in the second round of the competition, being involved with the European football. So any teams that weren't, of course, in European action take place their games, in Champions League action this week, of course. You've got some of the teams like Spurs, for instance, of course, too, who are there. But yes, let's run through them for you. Stoke drawing 1-1 with Fleetwood Town, but then Stoke winning on penalties. We could still get that cold Tuesday night in Stoke for Arsenal should they get a draw with them in the fourth round of the competition. Sorry, I don't know why I've got it in my head that it's second round. It's definitely third round. Third round action from the tournament. Arsenal playing Bolton, of course, next week. We've got Stoke against Fleetwood, which we've just said 1-1. Stoke winning on penalties. Blackpool 0. Sheffield Wednesday. Sorry, I'm really not with it this morning. 1. Brentford 3. Leyton Orient 1. Everton drawing 1-1 with Southampton, then losing to Southampton on penalties. Everton losing their fifth game in a row this season. Preston drawing 1-1 with Fulham and then knocking the Premier League side out on penalties. Queen's Park Rangers at the hands of their former player Eberechi Eze, and a first goal for Eddie Nketiah for Crystal Palace gave them a 2-1 win on the night. And Manchester United beating Barnsley 7-0. It takes Barnsley at Old Trafford for Anthony to score, but that is indeed what's happened. Tonight, we've got Brighton against Wolves and Coventry City against Spurs. And of course, we know that that next week we'll be getting more action in the League Cup with Arsenal taking on Bolton from the Emirates Stadium. So more of that to come. We've got Champions League action to discuss as well. There were games last night and today. Juventus beating PSV 3-1. These games are all relevant, of course, for Arsenal. It's not a case of looking at groups that don't affect Arsenal. Every game in this competition is relevant to Arsenal because the league phase means that every point counts. Juventus 3, PSV 1. Aston Villa winning their first game of a return to the elite European competition, 3-0 over Young Boys away from home. Bayern Munich beat Arsenal's opponents, Dinamo Zagreb, who they play in the new year, 9-2. An incredible scoreline that gives Bayern a massive goal difference boost, which of course could come into play later on down the line. Liverpool beating Milan 3-1. Real Madrid beating Stuttgart 3-1 as well. And Gyökeres on the score sheet once again as Sporting beat a 10-man Lille 2-0. Tonight's game see Bologna take on Shakhtar Donetsk. Sparta Prague take on Red Bull Salzburg. Club Brugge take on Borussia Dortmund. Celtic take on Slavan Bratislava. Manchester City play Inter Milan. Of course, we're hoping for a testing game ahead of Arsenal's clash with them at the Etihad on Sunday. And PSG take on Girona. Of course, we will be getting updates from Arsenal's preparations ahead of this game against Atalanta on Thursday. I'm heading off to the Schober Realty Training Centre this morning to see who indeed is going to be involved and who's not involved in this training session ahead of the potential flight out to Italy. Mikel Arteta will be taking his press conference from Bergamo in northern Italy this evening, so you'll hear from the Arsenal manager tonight. You'll be able to follow that press conference, of course, as always, on the Football.London website. But any updates from the training session, I'll be giving you the updates on over on FL and, of course, on my social feeds too. Now, an interesting injury cover-up claim has emerged from Arsenal fans yesterday as the Arsenal squad photo for the 24-25 season was taken. Interesting couple of points from this photo. The first that people may have noticed is some of the youth inclusions in this picture. We've seen Tommy Setford, Ethan Waneri, Aidan Heaven, and Miles Lewis-Skelly all included in the Arsenal first team photo. Does this confirm that these are all players that have received their official promotion to the Arsenal first team squad? I think it's a great show, of course, the faith that we've got in those players. Some may argue that, of course, Arsenal, had they done more transfer business, wouldn't have needed to include 3 outfield youth players, but all 3 are indeed considered to be, it seems at this stage, part of the Arsenal first team, which is a big, big boost to those. Aidan Heaven, of course, as we're understanding, is still yet to sign a professional contract, and they're still showing him that pathway is available and that those opportunities in the first team will come. But so far, we're still awaiting news on that. Interestingly enough, a couple of exclusions was Win the Dog. Don't know where Win the Dog is. Real shame not seeing Win there for me. Clear and obvious part of the team. Not sure why Win isn't there. She should be. Absolutely. Kieran Tierney is indeed there. You can spot him on the right-hand side of the picture next to Raheem Sterling and being towered over by Aidan Heaven. Mikel Merino is there, standing next to Gabriel. Of course, Gabriel, we were told, was the man that fell on Mikel Merino. There's a couple of good photos that came out from the pair laughing with one another. I'm not sure how much laughing there was when Mikel Merino was, of course, injured with Gabriel, but those two standing next to each other. But perhaps the biggest point of this, and something that you may have spotted across your social feeds over yesterday afternoon, is the 2 footballs at the front of this photo. Now, if you go back over previous seasons and previous squad photos, last year, of course, we had a community shield to show off, but no footballs. If you go back, though, to the 22-23 season, no trophies, of course, there, but no footballs in front of any of the players either. And then if you go back to the 21-22 squad photo, again, still no footballs present. So why are there 2 footballs at the beginning and front and foreground of this image? Well, the placement of these 2 footballs in this picture are very telling. One is placed in front of Bukayo Saka's right foot. I don't think there's any relevance to that at all. However, the other ball is placed not symmetrically, because if it was symmetrical, it would be much closer to Mikel Arteta's right foot. Instead, it's covering up the ankle of Martin Ødegaard. And that is, of course, the conspiracy theory that is surrounding Arsenal social media feeds yesterday. This has the Arsenal photographers put that ball in front of Ødegaard's foot to cover up whether or not he's wearing a boot, whether or not it's being protected or not. That ankle, of course, is the one in question that was injured during Ødegaard's game for Norway at the start of last week. But that is what has been going around social feeds. From my perspective, I've absolutely no idea. I'm going to ask some questions today. But I'm just relaying to you what was going around on social media. I think personally it's a lot of rubbish, but I just didn't want to not talk about it because I thought it was quite funny, and especially when you go back over some of the previous year's photos as well. We know he's injured, like it's not a case, but maybe there isn't a football boot behind that ball. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Now, yesterday evening, Sky Sports at a very late hour released the footage of the VAR discussions and refereeing conversations of Declan Rice's red card against Brighton. You can go and watch the footage and listen to how the referee and the VAR and assistant referees discuss this incident. Couple of points from this. One is that Declan Rice lies, which is quite funny. If you listen closely to the audio and you listen closely to the footage, you'll hear Declan Rice saying that he didn't kick the ball, which is, of course, he's going to say that. Like, it's not a big story. It shouldn't really be turned into anything too crazy. I think we've all been in those scenarios where we've been playing football. Maybe you've touched the ball and it's gone out for a corner, and you want to turn around to the ref and say, "It wasn't a corner. I didn't touch it. It's just part of football." But it is quite funny listening back to the footage of Declan Rice saying he didn't touch it, he didn't kick the ball, when he clearly, obviously, did touch the ball. Howard Webb talks about this being a pretty straightforward decision, about how players at the start of the season were reminded, of course, of the ramifications of delaying restarts. He was asked the question by Michael Owen about whether or not the ball moving played any part in this. He did take it into account, but said that, it was just in his mind, in the referee's mind, in the VAR and those looking at. I mean, VAR couldn't get involved anyway because it was a second yellow. It wasn't a straight red card. But all of the referees in the footage seemed in absolute unison about this decision. I still think it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't want to see players getting sent off for this. I think the referee has to use common sense. I think they have to apply. It's not about letter of the law, because later on in that game, or later on in the video, you hear Webb asked by Michael Owen about João Pedro's yellow cards, and he says it should be a yellow card. He says that João Pedro should have been booked, and they fed back to the officials that João Pedro should have been booked in the first half. And that just raises the talk of inconsistency. It raises that frustration surrounding the inconsistency of the officials' decision-making. If you've not booked João Pedro in the first half when you should have done, why have you then booked Declan Rice for a second yellow card in this moment? It's frustrating, it's annoying, and it's indefensible to a degree. We saw, of course, over the weekend that Anthony Taylor brandished a record number of yellow cards for decisions that many cannot quite understand why he decided to book so many players. I can tell you that Anthony Taylor has been pulled from refereeing duty for these weekend's games. This isn't because of him making mistakes or errors during the game against Bournemouth and Crystal Palace, but it is because of social media abuse that the referee has been subjected to, because of not because of, but just in the fallout of the game. He and his family members have been subjected to abuse from supporters from both teams over the course of the game. It's horrendous. And no matter what you think about officials, no matter what you think about how good they are, and we say consistently here that refereeing standards are not good enough at the moment, the quality of the referees is not good enough. Does that mean I go and send messages and abuse to these people directly, to their family members? Absolutely not. Because what messed up individual does it take to go and do that? And it actually coincides with something that I've done, taken action, myself. I'm coming off social media in terms of Twitter. I'm taking all of my stuff, barring just tweeting articles and tweeting videos, over to Threads, because I'm just sick and tired of that app being run completely stupidly, enabling people that think it's fine to abuse others with absolutely little to zero kind of consequence as well. So if you want to follow me over on Threads, it's at TomCanton94. You can find me over there, but I won't be discussing or debating or replying to anything over on Twitter anymore, because it's just a horrendous place. And sadly, it's a place which now effectively encourages, in some degrees, these types of incidents to happen. It's nothing about being soft. It's nothing about being, weak. If you're abusing people, whether or not you agree with the decision makers of ref, you need to give your head a bit of a wobble, because, goodness gracious me, you get one life and you're growing up being an internet troll. An absolute loser. Anyway, moving back to our headline story of the day, Rodri has been speaking out about the potential of player strikes. Really interestingly, the Club World Cup, of course, the expansion of this competition to 32 teams that will be held next summer, sees more games played for teams as well. And the Champions League expansion means that there are 2 extra games also played for the knockout stage of the before the knockout stage of the competition as well, giving more games. Of course, we've got international breaks galore. We've got one next month. We've got an international break the month after, October, November, and September, all with international breaks for Nations League games and qualifiers, etc. And it does, of course, mean that they are guaranteed to play 4 extra matches compared to last season. Manchester City, they're guaranteed to play at least 4 extra games compared to the games that they would have been expected to play last season because of the Champions League and the Club World Cup. Well, Rodri, speaking, has said, I think we are close to that when he was asked whether players will strike. If it keeps this way, it will be a moment that we have no other option, but let's see. And I absolutely agree with this. I absolutely agree with the players' right, and anybody's right in any profession, of course, to take action if they feel that the treatment of them and their well-being is being affected. No matter how much money anybody earns, if the welfare and the health and mental well-being of these players is being impacted and affected by the number of games that is being played and expanded to, the players are well within their rights to raise their concerns. And if that indeed means conducting strike action, then that's a decision that they are, I think, within their rights to come to, because it is getting ridiculous. The number of games is ludicrous. And while there is always this benefit of more money, this benefit of moving games around the world, it's the players who ultimately are the ones who are subjected to playing more and more and more and more football, so that injuries become more frequent, so that fatigue becomes more frequent, so the quality of matches overall diminishes. We see during summer tournaments, I think we see during summer tournaments tiredness from players. I absolutely do believe that we're seeing an increase in the the regression, if you like, of footballing quality. And if players decide en masse to go on strike, I don't think anyone could really have too much to complain about. And I think I would certainly be someone that would empathize with that point of view of players wanting to go on strike action. Of course, this is only hypothetical right now. This is only something that has been asked to Rodri directly. He didn't bring this up. He was asked about it. But he says it's something, he feels that it's something maybe that they're kind of getting close to. He says, I think we're close to that. I'll repeat that quote again. I think we are close to that. If it keeps this way, it will be a moment that we have no other option, but let's see. Bernardo Silva, of course, came out recently too to speak about the ridiculousness of the number of fixtures these players are being expected to play in. These are human beings. They've got families. They've got lives beyond this job. It's a very privileged position to be in, and they get an awful lot of money. But that doesn't matter how much money you get. The amount of money that you get cannot change, of course, how your body reacts to an insane number of fixtures that you are, of course, exposed to. So I think things can be done to improve the situation. I've talked about this before. I think there should be players should be prohibited from being called up to international matches if they've played summer tournaments during that first international break in September. I think that would be a good way of giving players a rest, at a certain point during the season, or indeed in later international breaks. I think these would be opportunities. I think Club World Cups and potentially those types of competitions could also limit players being, used in those games if indeed they've already played a certain number of minutes across a season. I think that's it. I think caps and things like this need to be looked at. I think the player representative boards, I think what the PFA can potentially look into it. The Players Football Association could look into it. I think that as a collective, players need to start coming together and talking about these things. And that's very, very important. Right. Of course, well, that's really exciting stuff, I think, actually, in a story that will come out, I think, a lot more of in the next maybe over the next year. I guess we will have to wait and see. But you won't need to wait a year at all when it comes to signing up for the best VPN service on the net, which, of course, is NordVPN, which you can go and get a significant discount off a 1 or a 2 year plan by going to nordvpn.com/Gooner and get yourself that significant discount off a 1 or a 2 year plan. A VPN service is an absolute must if you're traveling around the world, or even if you're in your own home and wanting better protection for whatever you might be doing surfing the net. It's just an absolute must, in course, to keep yourself safe online, to keep your data protected, and a VPN does that. It also changes your geolocation digitally on your mobile, your tablet, or indeed your laptop. And if you want to get a money-back guarantee of 30 days, well, you got that with Nord too. So do not hesitate. Go down to the link and go and check it out. Of course, Football Prize is also sponsoring the channel, continuing to give us support here And I recommend that you go over and check out the latest options and memorabilia available to you on the Football Prize website, which you can find the competition page down in today's description. But I can tell you that there is a brand new competition available that you can get involved in. I recommend that you do get involved in, because you could potentially be in hand of a signed Arsenal dual shirt display. Two of Arsenal's top defenders, Ben White and Ricardo Calafiori, dual Arsenal shirt signed by those players. 17 instant win opportunities too, including some signed football shirts of the likes of William Saliba and Gabriel as well. Plenty of more stuff too. All the information down in the link in the description. Go and check it out. UK only, of course, as always. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, this is going to be a slightly condensed part 2 and probably around for 10 more minutes or so, because I do need to start thinking about heading off to get to London. Kind of got to travel all the way around the M25, which is always a good fun thing to do on a Wednesday morning. So do bear with me if indeed this is a slightly shorter part 2, of course, than it usually is. So very much looking forward to hearing, though, from your thoughts and your feelings. Of course, 6 o'clock today as well, for those of you that want to tune in, is a very important UEFA Women's Champions League game. Second round, first leg in Hacken. Arsenal taking on Hacken, of course. So hopefully the girls can get the job done tonight at 6-2. Right. Let's go to Ashley. Says, changes for Atalanta. Kivior for Timber, Rice for Partey, Sterling for Saka, Jesus for Kai, Timber needing some rest for City. Kivior knows Atalanta, Jorginho, Sterling, Jesus, Nelly, Trossard didn't go to the international tournaments. Is that too many changes, Ashley? Atalanta are the current Europa League champions. Is that too many changes? That is my question. Did a piece yesterday where I ran through kind of the changes that I think I'd make going into this game that went out this morning. The only changes, I think, let's have a look. How many changes did I make? I made 1, 2 with Rice coming in, 3, 4. I made 4 changes, and my 4 changes were Waneri coming in to start. I just think he deserves it at this point. Sterling on the left, Calafiori at left back, and Rice in for Jorginho. You can bring off Partey for Jorginho later on, I think, in the game. That would be the changes that I would personally make maximum. I mean, the absolute maximum. If not, Waneri off, Trossard continuing in that number 10 role, still option for us too. Cass says the international break was unnecessary, especially as there was the Euros, Olympics, and the Copa America games played during the summer, and then the players had to go back to their league games as well. I think people that say, some nations need these qualifiers, they need to qualify for tournaments. You just change the structure. That's what I don't get from those types of arguments, is that it's a very simple one. You change the qualification process. You change how it's done. You decrease the number of games, you increase the potential rewards from those games, and you do it in that fashion. You just change the qualification process. It's as simple as that. Dana Beth Travels says, we need collectively to protect Twitter as a platform at all costs. It's up to the individuals to filter out what content they do and don't see. Free speech is worth more than feelings. The problem is, Dana Beth Travels, I'm not sure which of you is leaving the comment, is that this whole freedom of speech thing is a lot of rubbish. Because what freedom of speech is often used as a term is just used to vindicate or to justify saying whatever you like. As I so often use, and to steal James O'Brien's words, freedom of speech is not freedom from scrutiny. And so just because you're allowed to say in quotation marks, whatever you like, doesn't mean that what you then say should not then face consequence off the back of what you have said. Freedom of speech does not mean that you're allowed to say anything whenever and to whoever. That does not what freedom of speech means. Freedom of speech means that you have the choice to say anything you like to anybody, whenever, wherever. However, the issue with that is, of course, it does not mean that you will not face potential consequence for what you have said. And if you are abusive, if you are racist, homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, sexist, the list goes on. There's discriminatory causes, of course, that can lead to any potential, what I feel should be consequence, then that absolutely should lead to punishment. And so that is what is most key. Education is important. protecting society, protecting people's rights and safety is key. And sadly, that app, that platform has degraded and devolved into an absolute horrendous state. A horrendous state. And from that perspective, we should be seeing, and that's why I'm moving over to Threads for now. That's why I'm taking all of my discussions, all of my talking back, other than kind of posts about the videos and articles that I've published or any news that I've got. I won't be engaging. I won't be replying. I won't be doing anything that, is responded to that's just horrid. I'm just blocking. It's just easier that way. Any of my discussions on Arsenal is going to be taken over to Threads, because I just, for the moment, think that's a platform that potentially offers greater consequence for those that feel it's okay to send some pretty horrible things around the internet. Roland says, player strike is a joke. How about clubs capping their wages, get big squads and put a cap on the amount of minutes each player can play per season? Is there a players' union? I don't think, Roland, that a player strike is a joke, in my view, because ultimately the clubs, it's not on the clubs, Roland. It's never going to be on the clubs to do that side of it. The clubs are under pressure to perform. The clubs are under pressure to deliver. The clubs are under pressure to succeed. It needs to come from higher up. It needs to come from authority to put caps on amount of minutes, to put caps on number of games, and to stop incessantly expanding tournaments to the detriment of player welfare. And I am not surprised that there is talk of potential player strikes. There absolutely should be, that should definitely be something players should be, I think, considering, because it's getting to the point where injuries are on the increase, fatigue is on the increase, but also the number of games continues to be on the increase. Let's go to Cam says, freedom of hate speech should be allowed on Twitter then. This woke culture is twisted and molded to suit agendas. As you always see, often whenever you have conversations about, it's so interesting, isn't it? Like, we have a conversation about a referee that's been abused. That's the bedrock of this conversation. Anthony Taylor's family and he himself has received abuse online. Now, I know, and I have personally seen some of the abuse that family members of Joel Veltman received from so-called Arsenal fans following the incident that saw Declan Rice sent off. I've personally seen the messages that have been sent to members of his family, and they are horrid and disgusting. And if you were able to see them, which sadly I can't share them, but if you were able to see them, if you had seen them, and maybe one day it will be able to be made public, but if you were able to see them, and I think you can probably understand the reasons as to why they're not, but if you were able to see them, and you were able to see with your own eyes, of course, the horrendous words that some so-called Arsenal fans think it's okay to directly send without consequence to footballers, to individuals, to referees, to players families, referees' families. And that then leads to responses like we just saw on the screen there from Cam saying, this woke culture is twisted. This word comes up all the time. All the time. Whenever we hear anything about people saying that there should be consequences for abuse, for racism, for homophobia, for sexism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, etc., and so on, whenever you hear anything being talked about, barriers, obstacles, consequences being put in place for people that commit these types of actions, you hear the word woke come up. People haven't got a clue what the word woke means. For those that want to know what it means, it basically means socially conscious is what it means. And to be honest, anyone that ever gets accused of being so-called woke these days, 9 out of 10 times, they tend to be pretty nice people that just don't want people to get abused. So if you want to accuse me of being woke as someone who just wants to see people not get abused, not face abuse, that's what I want. And if you want to call me woke for not wanting people to be abused, call me woke. All you bloody like. I couldn't care less, because I'm going to sit on the side of the fence that's against abuse. I'm going to sit on the side of the fence that thinks that players and referees and their families shouldn't have to receive death threats from people that are just scared and cowardly and sitting in their parents' basements behind an anonymous Twitter account thinking they can say whatever they like. It needs to stop. There needs to be more consequences to it, and there needs to be more actions. And I don't blame the PGMOL for taking Anthony Taylor away to look after his mental health this weekend after he and his family members reportedly received that abuse. It shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. And if your response to that, if your response to people being abused is to start talking about woke culture, go look in a mirror and take a long, hard look at yourself and think about what on earth type of morals that you've got, would be my recommendation. Peter says, hey, Tom, I don't think that we can say it's not on the clubs. They have a duty of care to their employees, same as any other employer, and they will have to start using squads to manage the player load. Peter, I think that's a fair comment. And I think, I think primarily it should come from on high to think about the overall welfare of course, those people, those players. But to a degree, Peter, you're absolutely spot on. There is an element of this that should also come from clubs to consider the load on players. And to be fair, Arsenal are getting better at that. They could still be better. I think we could rotate more effectively. Absolutely, that's definitely something. Ollie says, do you think Neto will play against Atalanta? I highly doubt it. I think Raya will still play. I think the earliest that we'll see Neto, barring an injury, touch wood, is in the FA Cup next year, because, of course, he's cup tied for those Carabao Cup games. I would start Tommy Setford for the record against Bolton. I think that's something that we definitely could and should do. Let's go to Samuel. Says, Tom, we are generally so reserved about giving starts to Ethan, Miles Lewis-Skelly and others who are clearly ready. But for some reason, Arteta and the greater fan base are so reserved. I think that, you saw it at the weekend. Mwaneri got that opportunity. We're seeing players included in the squad. They're continuously training with that kind of that squad, and that's really important to consider as well. So I think that there is something about it's improving. We're going to see more of these kids play, get more minutes for these players. I think that the Bolton game is absolutely going to be a great opportunity to give these young players matches. So I look forward to that. Aman says, hi, Tom. I heard about the Big Gabby new contract discussion that was ongoing. I think it's a good one for us. Yeah, we talked about this on the show a few days ago, maybe even a couple of weeks ago. Ongoing, they want to improve his terms. He runs through until 2027. So, at the end of this season, they only have 2 years left. So, same for Saliba, of course. I think there's going to be discussions, of course, going on with a number of players that get down to that kind of level. And that's really, really important. Peter says, totally agree, Tom. Needs to come from above, but also the clubs can do more. I think we rely on that. Peter. Kingsley says, to change what people say, the culture needs to change. The football culture in this country seems to love abusing others like it's sport. And I have to think that, you see also like viral clips and viral content, the most, clippable, viewable, kind of most watched videos, if you like, typically are shouty, screamy, things that it's just and it's a spiral, isn't it? It just exponentially grows and continues to get worse, and there just doesn't seem to be too many barriers towards it. Rob says, imagine trying to get clubs to collectively 100% agree to a wage cap. Would never work. Clubs have always paid inflated wages to get players that they want / make sure they don't go to another club. Yeah, the wage cap thing, like, there are financial restrictions. It's worth pointing out the financial restrictions do exist, and wages are a part of that, because clubs, according to PSR, are restricted in terms of their overall losses, and wages, will definitely be involved in that. So there are some restrictions, and they are having an impact because they are seeing clubs punished. But ultimately, the idea of a wage cap is very difficult to see implemented, especially when the horse has already bolted, as the saying goes. I think the horse has already bolted at this stage. There are players on humongous wages that don't necessarily reflect the level of what they have produced as players wherever they happen to be. So the horse has kind of already bolted in that fashion. You can't bring those player wages in line. It would be maybe you could, but it would cause a lot of issues, I think, especially if only the Premier League did it, because players might start seeking, other European leagues to get competitive football and big kind of response, if you like. Razor says, you don't need a wage cap, you need less meaningful international football matches. Simple as that one then, for Razor on that point. I feel like I might have missed some comments, so I'm going to scroll a little bit. Northmead says, I find it interesting that people lose sight of the fact that it is simply inappropriate to abuse referees and their families for poor officiating. People have lost sight of what is appropriate. I think that there's an element of people are scared. Some people are scared of what's called the thought police, which I think is a mad concept. I think people are scared that it's going to get so bad one day in terms of what you can and cannot say, that you're going to end up getting punished for saying something that, while the majority of people might think isn't too bad, if you know what I mean. I think I'm trying to make this come across in the best, most coherent way I can possible. I think that's what some people are scared of, is they're scared of being punished for saying things that 20, 30, 40 years ago, whatever, it was fine to say. The reality is that 20, 30, 40 years ago, the world's changed. Things change. Society changes. We learn. We educate ourselves. We know things now we didn't know then. We understand more about mental health. We understand more about depression. We understand more about all these different things that are contributed to by abuse. And so we have to put things in place to try and protect people's well-being. But sadly, there are a number of platforms, Twitter being one of them, that seems to have removed many of those consequences and allow people to say effectively whatever they like. And I'm just not a fan of that going unpunished. I'm absolutely a fan of people being able to say what they like, but not without scrutiny. And that's what's key. Again, it's never about curbing freedom of speech. It's about enforcing that scrutiny of what has been said. Anyway, I feel like we went off on a bit of a social tangent, but it did, of course, relate into a lot of the topics that we discussed today, particularly the refereeing side of things. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Of course, if you've got something to say on this topic, it's always better that you put your point of view and explain it as well, rather than just leaving a blanket statement and then not replying to any kind of questions on it. So I do encourage you to do that, and let us know your thoughts. But I'm rounding this off because I've got to head off on the M25 drive round to Arsenal's training ground this morning, and I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm trying to think the last time I went to the Arsenal training ground. I think it was before the Bayern Munich away game. That's the last time I was there, so it's been a while. And I'm really much looking forward to seeing its improvements since, of course, Shoba Realty have come in and upgraded a lot of stuff, and also seeing, of course, whether Saka's there, Odegaard, Marino, Calafiori, Zinchenko. I'm not expecting the likes of Marino or Odegaard, really, so it'd be a bit of a surprise if they were there. But I am expecting, hopefully, Saka, fingers crossed, to be there. If he's not, you will know. I'll be tweeting it, because I will tweet only news and only videos from this point forward. And, of course, on my Threads account, which you can follow at Tom Canton 94 over there as well. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourselves and stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and stay respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.